In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. I've been in this church business for a very long time, and that means that I have been through more stewardship campaigns than you can shake a wallet at. And oftentimes, as you know, you who have been on vestries or whatever, when you begin stewardship campaigns, the question is, what will be our theme? What will be our slogan? And the first thing I find that comes to people's minds is this quote from the middle of this passage from Luke that we heard today. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Right? You know that phrase. I've seen it on lots of postcards you send out to people. The intention is to make people feel guilty and give money. That's what it's for. Because the point is to say to people, if your heart is with God, you'll give money to God. And if you don't give money, that proves that your heart is not with God. If your heart is with the church, you'll give money to the church. And if you don't give money, then that shows your heart is not with the church. Or you could say, if your heart were with the poor people that the church cares for, then your money would go there too, because actually we always give money to the things we love. That's the way we use this in the church. It's one of those clobber passages, you know, it's sort of a gotcha. It was the dean, our dear dean, who I was talking to him a year or two ago, and this passage came up, and he said something that made me realize that I have always misheard this passage. Because what we tend to make of this passage is, if you love something, you will give money to it. But really what the passage says is, if you give money to something, you will grow to love it. Where your treasure is, there your heart will go. So we tend to say to people, what you have to do is convert your bank account. But what the passage really says is, you have to convert your heart. And when you do, chances are, that's where your treasure will go. But the treasure seems to go first. You invest your treasure and your heart follows it. You know the saying, follow the money, right? This passage really, I think, is Jesus saying your heart always follows the money. Sometimes our hearts do not convert very easily. At least mine doesn't. And so sometimes I have to behave as if I've converted in the hopes that in the behaving I will be converted. In the 12 steps, there's a slogan. Those of you who are 12-steppers, you know this. In the 12 steps, there's a slogan, fake it till you make it. Do you know that phrase? It means if you can't be sober, maybe if you act sober, you'll get sober. If you can't be generous, act generous, and maybe you'll grow to become generous. You know that saying. And it seems to me what Jesus is saying to us in this passage is, if you want to be whatever it is, invest your treasure there, and your heart will follow. Okay? Where your treasure is, there your heart will be. This week we've seen people in the news who seem to love all sorts of things in which they've invested their treasure. And I have to wonder sometimes if it isn't the investing of the treasure that made them love it even more. When you invest your treasure in the manipulation of young girls, for example, I would suspect that the more money you invest, the easier it becomes to manipulate those girls. I would imagine that the more money you invest in guns, the more you love your guns, the harder it is to give up your guns. And fill in whatever it is. The thing that you invest in is the thing that you come to love. And the more you invest, the more you love. And it doesn't just mean money. I don't have much money. I'm a poor country parson. But I do have other treasure. I have time. I have my attention. I have all kinds of treasure. And my experience in my life has been that the more I invest in something, the more I come to love it. So Jesus says to us a very wise thing today. Where you invest what matters to you, that's the thing that you will come to love. Young girls, guns, self-protection, you name it. So what do you love? I suspect that when you invest in things enough, you will come to love them. For us Christians, I think what Jesus is saying to us, at least, is this. We have to decide what we want to love and invest in that. We have to decide what we want to love and invest in that. Because where our treasure goes, our heart will follow. I don't think it necessarily means for us Christians investing in what we actually do love. My love is not pure, and I suspect yours isn't either. I know it isn't, because I know that all of us are sinners. But as a Christian, as Christians, our call is to have in our minds the things we wish we loved. The things we wished we loved, even though in our sinfulness sometimes we can't love them. And to invest our energy into them so that our love for them will grow. What are the beautiful things that we Christians wish we loved? Beauty, truth, a rare commodity right now. Truth, goodness, that's all easy. But what about the poor? What about the marginalized? What about the despised people in our society? Isn't that what the gospel calls us to love? Isn't that what Jesus calls us to love? People in their suffering. And I don't know what it's like for you, but I oftentimes find those very people the hardest people in the world to love. And that would seem to me what Jesus says is, then put your treasure there, and your heart will follow. Put your treasure there, and your heart will follow. Every week we come here and we gather around the table of the Lord's body and blood. The church gives us this time. When held before us are all the things that we as Christians are called to love, even though maybe we don't. Look around this room. This is what you're called to love. This is what we're called to love. These people who are all so different and so unlike us. And truthfully, I suspect that I wouldn't necessarily love all of you very easily. I know that's hard for you to believe. On the other hand, I'm just as lovable as can be. This is the thing that we're called to love. The liturgy gives us images that we're called to love. I have a friend who says to me that every time he celebrates the Eucharist with the community, the post-communion prayer just hits him right in the middle of the forehead when he gets to the line that we ask God to give us singleness of heart. Because he says, I am so disjointed. My whole life is so disjointed. I am so far from having singleness of heart. But every week, the liturgy holds up for us this vision of something we might love, even though we don't. We might love And so we're called to invest in it, hoping that week by week by week, in time, we will come to love it. Each of you knows in your own life what the Christian dreams are that you wish you loved, but you just don't. You wish you loved it, but you just don't. What Jesus says to us today is, then you must do the heroic thing. You must put your treasure there. Put your treasure there, and in time, your heart will follow. Fake it till you make it. That really is, I think, the message of this gospel today, as Jesus calls us deeper and deeper into the kingdom that the Father has prepared for us.